The plane was full, the air buzzing with the usual shuffle of boarding passengers, the thud of luggage being crammed into overhead bins, and the clipped voices of flight attendants guiding people to their seats. For most, it was just another flight, another commute from one place to the next. But for Emily, a young mother barely into her 20s, this flight carried the weight of her entire world. She slid into her narrow economy seat near the back of the plane, her infant son, Noah, nestled in her arms. Her backpack, the only piece of luggage she owned now, was worn at the edges and stuffed beyond its limits, tucked clumsily beneath the seat. She pulled a thin cardigan tighter around herself and the baby, as though fabric alone could shield them from the weight of judgmental eyes. Emily's face bore the exhaustion of sleepless nights. Her eyes, though soft and kind, carried a dullness that only comes from months of survival on fumes, working late shifts, feeding her baby with barely enough formula, and holding back tears when she couldn't pay the bills. She had made the hardest decision of her life, to leave everything behind and fly across the country to stay with her estranged aunt. It wasn't ideal, it wasn't even a sure thing. But it was something, and right now, something, was more than she had. The baby stirred as the plane prepared for takeoff, his small whimpers vibrating against her chest. Emily rocked gently, whispering soothing words, "Shush, mommy's here. It's okay, baby." But when the engines roared and the plane tilted upward into the sky, Noah's whimpers erupted into cries, loud, piercing cries that bounced off the walls of the cabin and sliced through the humming white noise of flight. Passengers stirred, some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others groaned under their breath. A man in a suit pressed his noise-canceling headphones tighter against his ears. A mother with 2 older children muttered, "Thank goodness mine grew out of that stage." Heads turned, eyes flicked toward her, some sympathetic, many impatient. Emily's face burned red, she rocked harder, humming softly, bouncing Noah in her arms. But his cries only grew louder, shrill and insistent, the kind that made even seasoned parents grit their teeth. "Please, sweetheart, please stop," she whispered, her own voice trembling. "Mommy's trying, please." Her baby's cries didn't soften. Instead, they seemed to echo her own frustration, her own helplessness, magnified for the whole cabin to hear. Emily's chest tightened, her breath coming in short gasps. She felt the stares prick at her skin. She imagined what they must be thinking. Why can't she control her baby? She shouldn't even be traveling. Every whisper of judgment felt like a dagger. Her lips pressed to Noah's forehead as her tears finally spilled over. She tried to shield her face with the baby's blanket, but her shoulders betrayed her, shaking with each sob. She remembered everything that had brought her here, the apartment with peeling paint, the stack of overdue notices on the counter, the absence of Noah's father, who had disappeared as soon as responsibility arrived. The friends who stopped answering her calls when she needed them most. And the necklace, her mother's necklace, that she had sold just to buy this ticket. She had told herself that this flight was a step toward hope. Yet here she was, crying in front of strangers, feeling like a failure at 30,000 feet. The cabin buzzed with muffled irritation. Flight attendants glanced back from the aisle, clearly occupied with their drink service. No one moved to help. Emily felt like the loneliest person in the sky. Then, cutting gently through the noise, came a calm, steady voice. "Hey," it said softly, warm and unhurried. "You're doing okay." Babies cry. That's what they do. Emily looked up, startled. The voice came from across the aisle. A man in his late 40s sat there, dressed in a navy suit, though his tie was loosened and his posture relaxed. His face carried no hint of annoyance, only kindness. His eyes met hers, not with judgment but with understanding. Emily quickly wiped at her cheeks, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Everyone must hate me right now. I can't get him to stop." The man shook his head gently. "No one hates you, and you're not failing. You're a mother. That's the hardest job in the world." Something in his tone, calm, certain, fatherly, steadied her trembling heart. For the first time since Noah's cries began, Emily took a breath that reached her lungs. Her baby hiccuped, his cries tapering off slightly as if soothed not just by his mother's rocking but by the quiet assurance in the stranger's voice. Emily dared to let herself believe she wasn't as alone as she felt. "You've been handling this on your own," the man continued, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "That takes strength." Emily shook her head quickly. "Strength? I feel like I'm falling apart." "Sometimes," he replied, "falling apart is what makes room for a new start." His words lodged in her heart like an anchor. She pressed her lips together, trying not to cry again. The flight attendant arrived with the drink cart. The man ordered water, then asked for an extra bottle and some napkins. He passed them to Emily with a quiet nod. She took them with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. As the minutes passed, Noah's cries faded into soft hiccups, then quiet breathing. His tiny chest rose and fell against Emily's as he drifted into sleep. Relief washed over her in a wave so strong it almost hurt. Only then did the man extend his hand. "I'm Daniel." "Emily," she whispered, shaking it shyly. "And this little one, Noah." Daniel smiled warmly. "That's a strong name." They spoke in hushed tones as the flight continued. Emily, who had spent months bottling everything inside, found herself opening up. She told him about dropping out of college when she learned she was pregnant, about juggling 2 part-time jobs that barely covered rent, about watching her savings evaporate with each doctor's visit and each bill. She admitted how scared she was, flying across the country with no plan beyond her aunt's spare room. Daniel listened intently, never interrupting, never looking away. For a man in a business suit, he had an air of patience rare in a world always rushing. At one point, she asked politely, "So, what do you do?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I run a company." She didn't pry further. To her, he was just a kind stranger. But in truth, Daniel Whitmore was the CEO of one of the largest companies in the country, a man whose time was worth more than entire corporations, yet who sat there giving his full attention to a struggling young mother. As the plane began its descent, Daniel leaned slightly closer. His voice was careful, as though choosing each word mattered. "Emily, I don't want to overstep. But, when we land, would you allow me to help you? You've shown more strength today than you realize. And I think you and Noah deserve a fair chance." Her brow furrowed. "Help me, how?" Daniel reached into his briefcase and handed her a business card. It was heavy stock, embossed letters gleaming under the cabin light. "Daniel Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Enterprises." Emily blinked in shock. You're that Daniel Whitmore." He gave a small nod, unpretentious. "I grew up with a single mom. I watched her fight every day to give me a better life. I know what it's like to feel the world stacked against you. I can't change everything for you, but I can give you an opportunity, a job, childcare support, a safe place to start again. No strings attached, just a hand when you need one most." Tears welled in Emily's eyes again, but this time they weren't born of despair. They were born of something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. She clutched the card as if it were a lifeline. Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to thank you." Daniel smiled gently. "One day, someone else will need help. Remember this moment. That'll be thanks enough." When the plane landed and passengers surged into the aisle, Daniel helped her with her bag, carrying it down for her without being asked. They walked off the plane side by side, her baby sleeping peacefully, her heart pounding with disbelief and gratitude. The airport terminal bustled with its usual chaos, families reuniting, travelers rushing to connections, but for Emily, it felt like stepping into a new world. She was still the same young woman with a baby and a backpack, but something had shifted inside her. She no longer felt invisible. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of fear lifting, replaced by the fragile but undeniable spark of possibility. Emily held Noah closer, whispering softly into his tiny ear, "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Mommy's got you." And deep down, for the first time, she believed it. The boarding process felt endless. Passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle, bumping elbows, juggling luggage, and squeezing into cramped seats. The hum of the engines outside vibrated through the cabin, blending with the chatter of travelers. For most, it was an ordinary flight. For Emily, it was the most important journey of her life. She eased herself into her seat near the back of the plane, her infant son, Noah, cradled tightly in her arms. Her backpack, the only bag she carried, was wedged under the seat in front of her. Its zippers strained against the bulk of diapers, formula packets, and a few threadbare clothes. Everything she owned now fit into that single bag. At just 22, Emily already looked older, worn by stress. Her once bright eyes were dulled by sleepless nights and constant worry. Her cardigan, stretched thin and faded, barely shielded her from the airplane's chill. She kissed the soft crown of her baby's head, whispering, "We're going to be okay. We have to be." This flight wasn't just a trip. It was escape. It was survival. After months of struggling, late night shifts at a diner, unpaid bills stacking on the counter, her landlord's threats, Emily had finally accepted her estranged aunt's offer, "Come stay with me until you get back on your feet." It was a leap of faith, but Emily had no other choice. The baby's father had walked away before Noah was born. Friends she thought she could count on had drifted, too uncomfortable with her constant need. Selling her mother's necklace had bought this ticket, the last piece of value she had left. As the plane taxied and lifted into the sky, Noah began to fuss. Emily rocked him gently, murmuring, "Shush, it's okay, sweetheart." But the vibrations and unfamiliar noise startled him. His tiny whimpers swelled into cries, loud, desperate wails that pierced through the cabin. Passengers shifted. A man in a suit groaned, tugging his headphones tighter. A woman with two older kids rolled her eyes. Someone muttered, "Here we go." Emily's face burned with shame. She rocked faster, bounced lightly, whispered songs into his ear. But the cries grew louder, sharp and relentless. She could feel the irritation spreading through the rows around her. Every disapproving glance felt like another weight pressing on her shoulders. "Please," she begged in a whisper, her voice trembling. "Please stop, Noah. Mommy's trying." The harder she tried, the worse it seemed. Noah flailed, his face red with distress, his tiny fists clenched. Emily's hands shook as she tried to cradle him tighter, but her own tears began to fall. Her chest tightened, breath hitching as she fought back sobs. She thought of her tiny apartment, of pawning her last valuable possession, of the endless loneliness that had haunted her. She thought of how many times she had told herself she was strong enough, only to break down in the middle of a crowded airplane, humiliated and exhausted. Passengers stared. Flight attendants, busy with their service carts, cast glances back but didn't intervene. Emily felt utterly exposed, as though the whole plane were silently condemning her. She buried her face against her baby's blanket, her voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, so soft only she could hear. Noah's cries continued, and so did hers, mother and child, together unraveling at 30,000 feet. Then, through the haze of noise and judgment, a calm, steady voice spoke from across the aisle. "Hey," it said gently. "You're doing okay. Babies cry. That's what they do." Emily's head snapped up. Through blurred vision, she saw a man in his late 40s. He wore a navy suit, though his tie was loosened, and his face carried none of the irritation she had grown used to. Instead, his eyes were kind, soft, compassionate, steady. Embarrassed, Emily stammered, I'm sorry. Everyone must hate me right now. I can't make him stop." The man shook his head. "No one hates you, and you're not failing. You're a mother. That's the hardest job in the world." For the first time in months, Emily felt seen. Part 2. The CEO's compassion. The man didn't press closer, but his words lingered, grounding her. Something about his voice, gentle, measured, calmed not just Emily but Noah too. Slowly, the baby's cries softened into hiccups. Emily rocked him with renewed steadiness, her own sobs tapering into shaky breaths. The man smiled faintly. "See, you've got this." Emily swallowed hard, clutching her baby tighter. "It doesn't feel like it. I feel like I'm falling apart." "Sometimes," he said softly, "falling apart is what makes room for a new start." His words wrapped around her like a blanket. The flight attendant returned with drinks. The man requested a water bottle and an extra set of napkins, which he quietly passed to Emily. She accepted them with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, barely able to meet his eyes. Minutes later, Noah drifted to sleep, his tiny body finally at peace. Relief flooded Emily's chest. She exhaled shakily, as if she'd been holding her breath for hours. Only then did the man extend his hand. "I'm Daniel." "Emily," she replied softly, shaking it. "And this little one, Noah." He smiled. "That's a strong name." The ice broken, they talked in hushed tones. Emily, against her usual instincts, opened up. She told him about dropping out of college, about working long hours for wages that vanished as quickly as they came, about being abandoned by the man who had promised forever. She admitted her fears about starting over, about being nothing more than a burden. Daniel listened with full attention. Not once did his gaze drift to his phone or to the window. His presence was calm, steady, the kind that made her feel safe for the first time in a long while. When she finally asked politely, "So, what do you do?" He smiled modestly. "I run a company," he said simply. Emily didn't press. He seemed too kind, too human, to be one of the powerful executives she'd read about. To her, he was just a stranger offering compassion. But in truth, Daniel Widmore was the CEO of Widmore Enterprises, a man known nationwide for his sharp business mind and quiet philanthropy. As the plane began to descend, Daniel leaned slightly closer, his voice lowering. "Emily, I don't want to overstep. But, when we land, would you allow me to help you? You've shown more strength today than you realize. And I think you and Noah deserve a fair chance." She blinked, startled. "Help me, how?" He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. It was heavy stock, embossed in silver letters. Daniel Widmore, CEO, Widmore Enterprises. Emily froze, staring at it. Her lips parted in disbelief. You're that Daniel Widmore." He gave a small nod. "I grew up with a single mom. I know what it's like to watch someone fight alone. I remember her tears, her sacrifices. She didn't get help until it was almost too late. If I can make it easier for someone else, I will." Emily's throat tightened. I don't understand. "I can't change your past," Daniel said gently, "but I can offer you a job, childcare support, and a safe place to rebuild. No strings, just a chance to stand on solid ground." Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks again, but this time, they weren't from despair. They were from hope, a fragile hope she hadn't dared feel in months. She clutched the card as if it were life itself. When the plane touched down, Daniel helped her retrieve her bag from the overhead bin. He didn't act like a savior, he simply stood beside her, steady, supportive. As they walked off the plane together, Emily whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." Daniel smiled softly. "One day, someone else will need help. Remember this moment. That'll be thanks enough." In the bustling terminal, Emily hugged Noah close. For the first time in months, her steps felt lighter. She was still scared, of the unknown, of failing again, but she was no longer alone. Looking down at her sleeping son, she whispered, "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Mommy's got you." And deep down, she finally believed it.